and neither of them knew what was waiting for them around the corner when they decided to continue forward. They heard Harley's loud barks ahead of them, and they decided to carry on despite how sinister the path seemed. They had been walking for a while when Jesse suddenly felt Maddie's hands on his shoulders. He was excited when he said he knew what it was, but Jesse could see he was still nervous. Maddie Griezmann and Jesse Mason were best friends who said they wanted to start treasure hunting. Many doubted how successful they would become. The 20-year-olds were serious about their endeavor and didn't think of it as a joke. But they were serious about having it become a successful career and aimed to prove it to their families, too. But before they started, they needed to figure things out first. Anthony Griezmann was a successful attorney in the Oakwood area of Dayton, Ohio, and despite his young age, he was a father to Maddie. Maddie knew he wasn't an easy man to convince. Jesse and Maddie still didn't have enough money for travel expenses, even after they had put their funds together. They were both shaking with nerves, just thinking of asking Mr. Griezmann for help, but their plans depended on his support. Anthony had always had a special place in his heart for his son. He and his son shared the same dark hair and dark eyes. Their resemblance meant they were practically lookalikes. As much as he loved his son, he never hid his disappointment that his son hadn't followed him into the same career. Maddie kept this in mind as they approached him. Mr. Griezmann would often tell the shorter and quieter of the two, Jesse, to get his hair cut. It was difficult not to feel intimidated while they stood before him to ask for funds. Jesse made his hair look shorter by brushing his hair aside, while Maddie chose to make a deal with his father. They were both unsure if their plans would work. The friends felt like little kids having to explain themselves for doing something wrong as they looked up into Mr. Griezmann's serious face. It didn't help that he was wearing dark glasses. But Maddie knew how much his father wanted him to follow in his footsteps. He vowed that if they hadn't achieved their goal after 3 months, he would finish his law degree and work with his father. They stood there in anticipation before Mr. Griezmann finally agreed to Maddie's terms. The friends were overjoyed knowing that they would have the funds. They were about to start packing when Maddie's father called out. He wanted to change the terms of their agreement. He told them that instead of 3 months, they only had 2. The boys knew they had to make their only shot at this worthwhile. It wasn't long before they bought their equipment and set their plans. On a sunny day, they got to Cologne before heading to Brno. They specifically wanted to visit the south of the Black Forest in Germany. The forest was supposedly 3,000 square miles filled with WWII relics that would bring them a fortune. They had finally made it to the forest after a long trip and were surprised to discover something so soon. The two came across a friendly dog running about, undoubtedly lost. However, her collar had the name Harley on it. They felt for her and decided she could join them, considering there was no sign of her owners. She was friendly with her new company, and the boys soon realized she had quite a nose on her. They could never have thought they'd be so lucky to have found her. When she ran ahead in front of them, they could tell she knew the forest quite well by now. She had picked up a scent and wanted the men to follow. They had been walking for a while before they heard Harley barking. Jesse and Matt hastened the pace to see what had caught her attention but froze when they found something unusual sticking up from the earth. The 2 enormous pipes stood, sentinel and silent, looming in the murky afternoon. They protruded harshly from the ground, and their metal was stark and menacing against the forest backdrop. Shiver went through Maddie's spine at the sight of the foreboding twin metal soldiers guarding what? What secrets were hiding beneath? They would soon find out. As the men studied the pipes, they realized these were connected to something underground. Their excitement was palpable now. After circling for about 100 meters from the strange metal periscopes, they spotted the concrete entrance, a dark rectangular hole that was sunk into the ground at an angle. But it was hidden by a grassy mound of overgrowth and dead leaves and covered with a wooden lid. With boyish excitement, the pair got to work removing the lid with a crowbar and peered inside. Suddenly, Maddie shouted in alarm as a black cloud of flies buzzed up into their faces. There were stairs leading down, and there was an old iron gate barring the entrance. A sign menacingly warned, "Betreat and verboten." Harley took the lead, following her nose. They mustered all their courage, took a deep breath, and slowly walked inside. Following Harley, the men headed down the stairs and entered the structure. It was damp and massive, and its smell was overwhelming. Harley's echoing barks ahead in the murky darkness became unnerving. Unpacking solar torches and flicking them on, they were greeted with an endless hallway. Suddenly, Harley went quiet. Now the silence was deafening. Matt checked his research and jumped up in excitement. "This is a Second World War bunker," he whispered with glee. Now, all Maddie and Jesse could hear was the thump of their own hearts and their careful footsteps, echoing off the walls and down into the dark. Harley had gone strangely quiet as she went on ahead. Jesse checked his phone for the time and was annoyed to see the signal bar on 0. They had been warned by locals that there were rumors of live munitions on the site, so they proceeded very, very cautiously. The strange pipes connected to some kind of ventilation system. Decades of overgrowth up top had kept them hidden all along. The recent frigid temperatures probably killed the bushy areas to reveal them. It suddenly dawned on them they could possibly be the first people to see this place since the Second World War. The corridor seemed to go on forever until they reached a junction. Jesse warned that they should avoid taking any unnecessary turns to avoid becoming lost. Maddie shuddered at the thought of being underground in the concrete labyrinth, wandering for hours with no way out. So, without another word, they walked straight on. Then, something on the floor caught Jesse's eye, something green and shiny. As they neared the shiny object, they saw what it was. It was a green plastic bag from a local supermarket. Hattie grew uneasy. Who knew who or what would be waiting for them further on, down in the dark? Suddenly, the long corridor turned sharply. They must be miles underground now. The claustrophobia was suddenly unbearable. The dank smell grew stronger here as the corridor widened. Jesse thought he heard something from a distance and stopped abruptly, placing his hand on Maddie's chest. They both listened intently. A faint dripping sound was coming from ahead. There were marks on the wall that looked like someone had punched at it with a hammer at random intervals. Jesse didn't know why, but the thought of someone down here swinging a hammer deep underground in a forgotten bunker made his skin crawl. Well, they rounded the corner, and Jesse half hoped it would be a dead end. But it wasn't. There was a rusted yellow door that had been ripped savagely from its hinges and cast aside, revealing a narrow doorway of blackness. The immense door looked like the door to a vault and had Cyrillic writing stenciled onto it in blood-red ink. But who or what had done such a thing, and how? Dale's mind traveled to every horror story he had ever heard. What awaited them behind the doorway? They passed through the doorway and came to another corridor. Harley suddenly let out a loud bark. Maddie slipped, sending waves of stagnant water to the far side to lap at the walls. As he flailed, his wild flashlight beam revealed a dark silhouette of someone crouching on the far wall as he scrabbled to get up. Jesse swung his flashlight blindly in the direction of the figure, but it was gone. Well, Maddie got up and ran back in a blind panic, taking cover behind Jesse. This room was completely flooded. But to Jesse's dismay, the flashlight revealed that the walls were made of heavy lead. The water, now disturbed, rocked eerily back and forth, releasing unseen clouds of gas. They hadn't expected to find these silent and watery rooms, and they hadn't brought respirators. The air was growing thick, and the fright left them reeling. The urban explorers had unwittingly stumbled upon the secret back entranceway into the subterranean depths of Lager Corrale, built in 1939 during World War II as a naval intelligence school. Shortly after, the German Naval High Command moved into the underground bunker and transformed it into their U-boat headquarters. It was here, in the middle of the forest and away from prying eyes, the rockets were stored, silently aiming at Berlin. The subterranean entrance was little known, even to the locals. Till the tales of live munitions had ensured that errant teens and curious children stayed away. What mysteries would the pair find there, waiting quietly in the ruins and decay? Maddie and Jesse were rattled by what they had seen. The silence and the sensation of being cut off from the world were taking a toll on their senses. This environment was ripe for their imaginations to run wild, so they had to try to keep them in check. Was there someone down there in the dark with them, or had it been a trick of the light? But either way, they had to get out. The noxious gases that could be in the corridors also posed a threat. They tried to trace their way back through the black labyrinth, but their navigational senses were useless below ground, with only flashlights to guide the way through the tunnels that all looked the same. Jesse's heart sank. Then he saw something wink in the corner of a waterlogged room, a glint that caught the light and threw it back. He kneeled down and felt along the stone ground until his hand closed on something flat and solid with rounded edges. He slipped it into his pocket. They must have turned at a junction further along. The flooded rooms had been further down the long corridor, on a level that was lower by a step. Jesse's instincts told him to move in a westerly direction and try to find the junction where they had taken the wrong turn. But they needn't have worried. Harley knew the way. Hurrying up the steps and bursting from the bunker, Maddie and Jesse rested their hands on their knees and doubled forward, taking huge gulps of the fresh air. It was night. They could see the stars shining faintly through the trees. That's when Jesse remembered the prize he had found. He pulled the object from his pocket and shone the flashlight onto it to take a closer look. The object was heavy, and etched on it were some nondescript numbers that read 9999. Then it hit him. Jesse held a 500G bar of pure gold in his hand. How long had it been down there in the forgotten bunker, lying in the corridor and waiting for him to find it? They had to look for more. With their eyes on the prize, going back down in the morning suddenly didn't seem so daunting. Exploring the rooms, they found an unused mortar shell. Above ground, Jesse used his metal detector, which indicated a solid presence in the ground. Digging around in the corresponding area below, they made the discovery of a lifetime. All those years ago, the soldiers based here had hidden historical artifacts inside the bunker's walls. Had they found more World War II relics and other historical artifacts, likely confiscated by the German army, they donated some items and sold the rest to pay back Mr. Griezmann before investing in better equipment. Their ambitions realized the best friends had no plans to ever change careers again. And never finding Harley's owners, they decided to adopt the treasure-sniffing pooch too.